Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Dr. Joey interviews Christian business professionals just like you to discover their secrets for working faith positive in a negative world. Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett.
Hey, Faith Positive Nation, Dr. Joey Fawcett here for another outstanding episode of Faith Positive Radio. And I say outstanding because today our guest is an author who is going to share with you how you can get something that you have really been needing in 2020. Something you have asked for, something you have cried out to God for, something you have sought for with every fiber of your being, because 2020 could have been, as it is for so many of us, the most trying, challenging life year for you, right? Because it stressed us all out. So we're looking for ways to get rid of stress. Man, I talk to people, it seems like every day, who are anxious. They're just walking around with a low boil of anxiety going all the time. And who hasn't experienced fear in 2020, right? There has been just so much fear that's been captivating us. And if it doesn't show up on your doorstep personally, every news source that you could possibly turn on, right? They are all promulgating fear and anxiety and stress and just exponentially ramping it up. So I don't know about you, but in the midst of all this insanity, I'm looking for some of God's peace. And I suspect you are too. So my guest today has something for you that is invaluable. It's going to make a huge difference in your life, a positive difference, and it will help you work faith positive so you increase your faith with greater joy in your work so that you love God and others more. The name of the book is Choosing Presence: How to Access God's Peace and Release Fear, Anxiety, and Stress. And I've got the author with us today, Jim Heaney. Jim, thanks so much for coming on Faith Positive Radio. I'm excited to have you on today, buddy.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. So choosing presence, how to access God's peace and release fear, anxiety, and stress. How do we do it, Jim? Take us right to it. How do we do it? Well, no, first of all, how'd you come about to write this book?
Well, first of all, I've been teaching presence for over 20 years. I volunteer in a jail ministry.
Oh, do you?
And I teach it to inmates. Also do classes in my home. I've done many talks on presence, interviews. And the reason I wrote the book mainly is that even though there's a lot of books about presence, not too many books actually tell you how to actually practice presence.
Yeah, they tell you that God's presence is the best way and you ought to be in God's presence more, but your book is tactical.
Yes, exactly. And, as I'm sure people have told you, do we believe that God's presence can change us from the inside? Absolutely. But so many people are asking, well, how do you actually access God's presence? That's what we're not teaching enough.
Right.
What we've done is, basically the book is, what is the core problem with our society today? And the core problem is, which is very obvious, especially today with all the, not only the coronavirus, but with all the demonstrations going on, and some of them are quite violent. We already had almost an epidemic of anxiety before this.
Yes.
Now it's gotten even worse between the anxiety, the inner fears, the worry. And what we do with the book is basically identify what is the origins of all our inner fears and conflicts. Then what is the solution to this? And there's only one solution. And the solution is connecting with God's spiritual energy through the peace and power of the present moment.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And then we go on to explain, how do we actually implement that? What's so important in practicing presence, which we'll talk about, is stillness. Why is stillness so important? Well, number one, it's exactly what God told us to do. Be still and know that I am God. See, but unfortunately, I think too many Christians thought that was a suggestion by God. It wasn't a suggestion.
Yeah. It wasn't a universal principle by which you want to live your life. It's just, hey, if you've tried everything else, then sit still and then get into my presence. When in fact, the reverse is true. Here's how you get into God's presence. And that is still.
It is a command. It is a command.
It is. Now, to understand that need for stillness that's built within us, right, Jim? It's part of that Imago Dei, the image and likeness of God within us. Take us back. You mentioned the origin of all of this fear and anxiety and stress in our world today. What do you see as that origin?
The origin is this. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
If we were to ask ourselves or anyone, any time that we've had anxiety, worry, stress, nervousness, lack of self-esteem, if we asked ourselves, am I present now? 100% of the time, the answer would be no. Now, if we asked ourselves the times when we feel God's peace, joy, love, contentment, and we asked ourselves, am I actually present now? 100% of the time, the answer would be yes.
Now,
and one of the reasons for that is there was a study done on the average person. Okay, I think it was the National Institute of Mental Health.
Okay,
the average person thinks up to 60,000 thoughts a day. Now, that's bad enough.
But that's a lot of thoughts, man.
Yeah, but of those 60,000 thoughts, 80% are negative.
Wow.
So think about it. We're doing 60,000 thoughts, and basically 48,000 of those are negative. That's a big, big obstacle to being present.
Yeah, it's really working faith negative instead of faith positive, isn't it? I mean, if 48,000 out of 60,000 thoughts are negative, right?
Yeah. And they'll tell you, they did another study. Worry. This is Cornell University.
Okay.
Of all the worries we have, 85% of all our worries never happen.
Wow.
85%. Yet, our worries are the main cause of all our inner fears and all our inner conflicts.
And I'm sure worry dominates those 48,000 negative thoughts we're having every day. And yet 85% of them never come true. So what I've got is my imagination running on steroids down a negative path, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Now, when we say how important stillness is, and God tells us, be still and know that I am God. What he's saying to us is this: as we bring in stillness and become consciously in the present moment, we cannot create all this negativity because it does not exist in the present moment, because we always create it when we're outside the present moment.
So stillness is my being totally aware of and in tune with what's going on right now. So instead of allowing my mind to be distracted and wander down a gazillion other paths, 48,000 of which are negative, right? I'm focusing on Jim Heaney and Dr. Joey having this conversation right now and absorbing each word and the impact of each word. And that's what being still in the present moment's all about.
Absolutely. And also being aware, what it does for us is this. It makes us aware of what we're actually experiencing inside. And as we practice presence on a regular basis, what happens to us, our awareness changes. And once our awareness changes and we recognize inner unease or even inner chaos building up, it gives us a choice. Do we accept all the anxiety and misery we're going to create if we remain unconscious outside the present moment, or we're going to be in the center of where life is, God's spirit is, our peace is, consciously in the present moment. That's the gift God has given us.
And choice is that gift, right, Jim?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what do you say, Jim, to someone who is not exercising that choice right now? They may be a Christian, but they would say to you, Jim, I go to work and man, you don't work with the people I work with. Or Jim, you don't work for the boss I work for. Or you don't know about all the trouble in the industry I'm in, or you don't know about the clients that I have to take care of, or something like that. They feel locked in by all this negativity and don't feel like they have a choice. Give us a tactic for releasing that negativity and actually making a choice to choose God's presence.
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
We start our day with the practice of presence.
Okay.
And we have this free app where a person, now they start their day consciously present. They know exactly what they're looking for then and throughout the day. Then throughout the day, what we do is we give an hourly reminder on that same app to take 3 conscious breaths with always the same intention. And the intention is to connect with God's spiritual energy. And what that does to us, as we do it consistently, it's what we call we inner condition ourselves to being consciously present. So as I said earlier, we start to recognize when we're falling into a negative state.
Okay.
And by recognizing when we falling into a negative state, it is the beginning of the end of self-created inner negativity.
Self-created inner negativity. Man, let's unpack that a little bit. So what I hear you suggesting, Jim Heaney, the author of Choosing Presence, is that I create my own negativity. It's a choice I make to be negative.
It's a choice we make, but we make it in an unconscious state, meaning this. When we are consciously present in this moment, we're here. So, but what we do is we're here physically, but our mind too often is thinking or obsessing about something that did happen, or it's thinking or obsessing about something that might happen, or we're in resistance to what's happening at this moment. Very important is that whatever we resist has power over us. Whatever we accept in non-resistance no longer has power over us. When Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, he was being tortured and killed, but it had no power over him. He accepted what is. He accepted God's will. So those same people that, let's say they're in a not friendly atmosphere at work or in other situations, they have a choice. They have to realize when it becomes negative and when they go outside the present moment in a compulsive negative thinking cycle.
Gotcha.
As you stay in the present moment, you realize none of that negativity has power over you if you accept it for what it is and you accept the peace and power of the present moment.
So my tactic is to remain in this present moment. And what's happened is, for so many of us, as a defense mechanism, when something's happening right now that I don't like, right, or that I'm resistant to, for Christ, as you mentioned, it was being crucified on a cross, right? Then I either go back in my past and drudge something up, right? Or I use my imagination to start worrying about something that has yet to happen, just to get out of that present moment, because I'm not sure what's going to happen, right? And so it's this defense mechanism. And and denial ain't just a river in Egypt. So I leapfrog either into the past or into the future. So when I stay in the present moment, what I want to do is observe it without participating in it, is what I hear you saying. Just to see what's going on, right? To see what's happening in this present moment. And then like Christ, just to say it is what it is. What do I do in the next step then after I resist? If I resist the present moment, it's going to persist, right? It's just going to keep firing back at me. But if I accept it and embrace the present moment, it may not be the choice that I would make. What do I do next to move through that negativity to discover God's presence?
Well, as we say, we consciously breathe with the intention of connecting with God's spiritual energy. And as we consciously breathe, what happens to us, we start to feel an inner peace, calm, or joy as we do it consistently. So we always have a choice. Are we going to choose the negativity when we go outside the present moment, or the peace that always exists in the present moment? All our problems, they all come and they all go. Our life is eternal and always whole in this moment, because that is where God's Spirit lies.
So in staying in the present moment, I capture these 3 breaths, right? And I look through the negativity for where God is, for God's presence. Man, you're reminding me, Jim Heaney is the author of Choosing Presence. There's a link on his page on our website at getpositive.today where you can go and click right through to Amazon and pick up your copy. So if you want to do that while you're listening, getpositive.today is the website while you're listening. Go ahead and get your copy right now. Choosing Presence, how to access God's peace and release fear, anxiety, and stress. So when I push through the present moment's negativity and I take these 3 breaths, right? What I hear you saying is when I find God, right, or am found by God, allow myself to be found by God in that present moment, then that eternal connection with God's energy is revitalized. You make me remember in Matthew and in Luke, the 4th chapter, first 11 verses, the temptation of Christ right after his baptism, right? He's driven out into the wilderness by the Spirit for 40 days. Right. And he's hungry, and then Satan comes to him, starts tempting him. 2 out of 3 overtly, the 3rd temptation covertly suggests, if you are the Son of God, right? And so what Satan's trying to do is drive a wedge in the relationship between the Father and the Son at that point. So you make me think that the negativity that I'm experiencing in this present moment is Satan's attempt to divide me from the God who loves me so. So once I see through that, Christ used the word, and so once I take those 3 breaths, and so I'm inhaling and exhaling Scripture, then what Paul promised us in Philippians 4 about the peace of God which passes all understanding, right? How can Christ have peace hanging on a cross? How can I have peace at work, working for this boss, working for the people that I do, the clients that I have, all the negativity that's around us? The peace comes from being in God's presence and knowing that I'm a son or a daughter of God at that moment. Now you kind of did a drive-by around this free app that you got, but I'm intrigued by that because I hear you talking about push notifications that remind me to breathe 3 times an hour and things like that. Tell us more about that app.
Yeah, and just as, by the way, everything you said is exactly dead on.
Oh, okay, cool.
The key is that when we practice presence consistently, we know through our own experience that God's peace is always available in this moment. But we're not going to know it unless we actually practice it. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people that may try and think their way into presence.
Yeah, right. If I just think hard enough. But we're back to what you resist persists. So if I say, I'm not going to think about that pain in the rear customer, what do I think about more? If I'm not going to think about my boss more to get into God's presence, who am I thinking about? The boss instead of God, right? I love that.
Absolutely. So we can't think our way into presence, but we can and do think our way into inner fears, inner conflicts, anxiety and worry and lack of self-esteem. And as what makes the app so important is that all of us resist change at some level. What the app?
You mean we don't wake up in the morning going, "What can I change about my life today?"
Right.
Oh man, we do resist change. The only person I've ever met wanted change is my 3-month-old granddaughter. Right? She wants her diaper changed. But that's about it, right? Yeah. Right. Okay. And so the app helps us with change.
Exactly. It breaks down that resistance because it's so easy to do when you actually use the app. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Now I've been practicing presence over 20 years. My wife, over those 20 years, intermittently has practiced presence with me.
Oh, nice.
But maybe once a week, twice a week. Since she started using the app with me 7-8 months ago, she has not missed one day of practicing presence.
Wow. Now, what does it look like when Ms. Heaney is practicing God's presence? And therefore, when I'm practicing it, when we're using the app, what does that look like?
Well, what it looks like is we're sitting in a meditative state.
Okay.
We can be on the floor in the chairs, back straight.
Okay.
Okay. We're consciously breathing. And the app, by the way, takes you right through how to breathe properly.
Oh, nice.
It also tells us what's so important. Why is it so important to actually practice presence on a daily basis? And basically what it tells us is that becomes our foundation. When we start to practice presence in the morning, we know exactly what we're looking for. And then we know exactly what we're looking for throughout the day. Okay. And that's why the 3 conscious breaths with the intention of connecting with God's spiritual energy keeps us, if not in the present moment, close to the present moment.
Gotcha.
Meaning that we could sense when inner negativity may be building up, and we know exactly the way back to presence. I say this, there's 3 very important questions that the practice of presence allows us to answer. The first one is, why am I present? What's the reason I'm present? The second one is, I also know why I'm not present. And the third one is, I know how to get back to the present moment. When we answer those 3 questions through our own experience, it allows God's Spirit to change our life. And we learn those 3 questions through the consistent practice of presence because we are inner conditioning ourselves. We can't do it intermittently. If we do it intermittently, does it give us some relief? Yes.
Yeah, for the moment.
But if we do it consistently, it is the cure. Because it's not so much what we do, it's what God does to us when we bring in stillness. That's the gift.
Boy, and what a gift that is. So you're reminding me, Jim, of the importance of muscle memory when athletes are training. They train consistently. It's why baseball players are in the batting cage. It's why football quarterbacks are constantly throwing and receivers are running routes, right? It's that practice, which builds the muscle memory. What we're doing here is building a spiritual muscle memory to help us get back into God's presence even faster when we practice it consistently. And that's what your app does. Now, did you say this app is free?
It's free. And you can download it on the iPhone or your Android phone.
Okay. So I just go to the Apple Store or the Google Play Store and I pick up my copy there. Wow. So I don't have to buy the book to get that. I just go get that. But it sounds like to me the book really drives towards more tactics.
Oh, the book is very important. Obviously, it gives us the whole foundation of why we're actually practicing presence.
Okay. All right.
And by the way, the app is free, but all the proceeds from the book go to charities.
Really?
Yes, absolutely.
You mean when I
look? What God gives us for free, we have to return for free.
Oh, wow. We refer to that as the receive core practice of a faith positive work style. I love that. So all the proceeds from Choosing Presence by Jim Heaney go to support charities that help people to be more present in this world today. So, hey, Faith Positive Nation, not only do you get all this immense wisdom that Jim Heaney has written into this book, Choosing Presence, but you get to help somebody also. When was the last time you got to do that, right? That's amazing. Jim Heaney is our guest today on Faith Positive Radio, the author of Choosing Presence, How to Access God's Peace and Release Something that you want to release every single day, right? Fear, anxiety, and stress. I'll choose God's peace 10 out of 10 times over fear, anxiety, and stress. And then you can go to the Apple Store or the Google Play Store and pick up this free app. Now, Jim, the name of the app is what?
The name of the app is Practicing Presence, a Christian Way.
Okay, so when you go into the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, Practicing Presence in a Christian Way. Go to getpositive.today if you're walking the dog or you're where you can't write this information down. Or you're riding your bike or whatever it is you're doing right now, right? That prevents you from writing it down. Just go to getpositive.today and in the search bar, enter Jim Heaney. That's Heaney. It'll take you right to this episode of Faith Positive Radio, or you can search in your favorite podcast aggregator or player and you'll find it. Jim, I got a feeling I know the answer because you've talked about it so much, but I always, in every episode, unless I have a massive brain cramp, remember to ask my guest about a favorite Bible verse or Bible passage. I think I know what yours is, but I'm going to ask anyway. Let's see if I'm right.
I actually have two.
Oh, you have two. Okay, now I only think I know one of them, so I'm going to get surprised.
The first and foremost is Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I am God.
Yeah, that's the one that
Second one is
anticipated. Yeah.
What's
the second one?
The second one is Jesus when he's at the well with the woman.
Yeah.
And he tells her, God is spirit. True believers will worship God in spirit and truth. Oh, wow. Spirit is breath. Yes. Presence comes through the breath, which connects us to God's spirit.
And that's why the app reminds me to take those three, you refer to it as conscious breaths, right? Because you're naturally breathing, right? Or else you can't access the app. But these are conscious breaths. And so these are teaching you to breathe correctly and really oxygenate your brain and your heart as well. Wow.
And what we say about the breath is this.
Yeah.
When we just take 3 breaths, it's biological. If we're taking 3 breaths, and it could give us some relief.
Right.
But when we take 3 conscious breaths, follow our breath in, follow our breath out, and we say the intention to connect with God's spiritual energy, it becomes a spiritual practice, not just 3 biological breaths.
Yeah. So I'm doing a lot more than oxygenating my brain. I am enlivening, invigorating my spirit. Man, you're reminding me of that story, the creation story in Genesis 1 and 2, where God lifts Adam, dripping wet, right, out of the clay, and then goes nose to nose with him. And the scriptures say, breathed into man the breath of life, or man, some translations refer to him as became a living being at that moment. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's that ruach that he puts into us, right?
Yep.
And then, oh man, you're reminding me of another one too. At Pentecost, right? The pneumos, the Holy Spirit sounded like a rushing wind. So there's that animating presence of breath, man. Well, as soon as I say goodbye and hit the stop button from recording this, I'm going to take 3 conscious breaths and get into Christ's presence right then and there. Jim Heaney is the author of Choosing Presence, How to Access God's Peace and Release Your Fear, Your Anxiety, and Your Stress. Go to your Apple Store or your Google Play Store and look for the free app, Practicing Presence, a Christian Way. And know that all the proceeds, when you go to Barnes & Noble or to Amazon and purchase Choosing Presence, all the proceeds from that go to Jim Heaney's favorite charities. So you'll be not only helping yourself, but you'll be helping someone else as well. Jim, this has been absolutely intriguing. tell us, I think you've got a Facebook page. Tell us how we can get more information and reach out and contact you.
Yeah, the Facebook page is called Jim Heaney, Choosing Presence. And on there we have information on the book, on the app, and some talks I've given, and interviews.
Oh, sweet. That's great. And Chuck's put a link to that also on Jim's page on our website at getpositive.today. But if you're on Facebook, and who's not, right, unless you're on the gram, right, just look at Jim Heaney, Choosing Presence. Just search for that on Facebook and you'll find him there. Jim, this has been an amazing, amazing interview. I have learned so much. You've prompted me in so many ways. I feel like I'm more peaceful just after listening to this episode of Faith Positive Radio myself. So I know that you've helped Faith Positive Nation a lot. And I just pray God's blessings on you. Your amazing wife of how many years, Jim?
52.
52. She reminded him of that just before we started the recording. So that's how he knew. I ratted you out. Sorry. Just Jim Heaney, Heaney, Choosing Presence. Man, God's blessings on you and your amazing wife. I really appreciate this opportunity to chat with you today. I've learned a lot, and I know Faith Positive Nation has too.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
God bless you, Jim.
God bless you too.
Thanks for listening to Faith Positive Radio, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Suggest guests and ask questions when you email Dr. Joey at info@getpositive.today. And be sure to get your free gift of the 5 positive business conversations to have today coaching program at getpositive.today. Until next time, may God bless you with everything your heart can hope for and more than your mind can imagine.